This tech bill that has the Senate really scared is frankly quite a big deal. For those of you who are watching over on, of course, Rumble or YouTube, I'm pulling this up on this screen. This is an article from Ars Technica, and they got it originally from Wired. It was out in Wired earlier in the month. And it's pointing out a real big problem. This isn't just a problem. This is a problem for both the legislature, in this case we're going to talk about the Senate, and a problem for our friends in big tech. So let's define the first problem as the big tech problem. You're Amazon, you are Google, those are the two big targets here of this particular bill we're going to talk about, or maybe you're Facebook or one of these other Facebook properties, etc. If you are a small company that wants to compete with any of these big guys, what can you do? Well, obviously you can do what everyone's been telling us. Oh, if you don't like the censorship, just make your own platform. And there have been a lot of places and people that have put a lot of money into trying to make their own platform. And some of them have had some mild successes. So, for instance, I'm on Rumble. You can watch my videos there. And there have been some successes that Rumble has had, making it into kind of the competition to YouTube. But YouTube is still the 800-pound gorilla. Everybody wants to be where the cool kids are, right? So for most people, that's YouTube. They look at YouTube as being the popular place. So that's where we should be. We obviously saw the whole thing with Elon Musk and Twitter and the goings on there. And Twitter really is kind of the public square, although it's died down a lot because of the censorship on Twitter. Interesting, right? So as time goes forward, these various big companies are worried about potential competition. So how do they deal with that? This is where the real problems start coming in. Because we saw Amazon, for instance, in support of an internet sales tax. Remember that whole big deal? The internet had been set aside saying, hey, no states can tax the internet, and that's going to keep the internet open. It's going to help keep it free, and people can start buying online. And that worked out fairly well. A lot of people are out there selling. Why would Amazon support a sales tax on the internet? They are the biggest merchant on the internet, probably the biggest merchant, period, when it comes to not just consumer goods, but a lot of goods like Staples might carry for business. So they'd have to deal with what? There are 9,000 different tax jurisdictions in the United States alone. Then, of course, all these other countries. But, we're not going to talk about them right now. But the United States, 9,000 tax jurisdictions. So why would Amazon support an internet sales tax when there's 5,000 tax jurisdictions? Well, the reason is it makes life easier for them when it comes to competition. So if you are a little guy and you want to sell your widgets or your service, whatever it might be, online, you now have to deal with 9,000 tax jurisdictions. It's bad enough in the Northeast. If you are in New Hampshire, if you live in New Hampshire, and you spend more than, I think it's 15% of your time south of the border in Mass, then Mass wants you to pay income tax for that 15% that you are spending your time there. Now, they do that with the baseball teams, with football teams, hockey, you name it, right? So the big football team comes into town, the Patriots are paying the New York Jets or whatever it might be. The Patriots have to pay New York State taxes, income tax now, because they stepped foot in New York. Heaven forbid that they try and do business there and help New York State out. And they now have to pay income tax. Now, they only have to pay income tax for the amount of time they're in New York, and various states have various weirdnesses. But if you're only playing, 2-3 dozen games a year, it isn't like your normal work year, which is 2,080 hours. We're talking about they're playing in New York, and they're only spending maybe 10 hours working in New York. But that represents what percentage, 10, 20, 30% of their income, depending on how many games they play and how they're paid. And so they got to keep track of all that and figure it out. Okay, well, we played in New York, we played in New Jersey, we were in Mass, we were, well, they weren't in New Hampshire, certainly the Patriots playing, but they got to figure it all out. Well, guess what? Those big pay football players, hockey, baseball, they can afford to have a tax accountant figure it all out and then battle with them. I had a booth one time at a trade show down in Connecticut. Didn't sell a thing. It was terrible. Trade shows, man, they aren't what they used to be, and they haven't been for a long time. This is probably a decade plus ago, right? Maybe even 20 years ago. So I had a little booth. We were selling our services for cybersecurity, and of course, nobody wanted to bother paying for cybersecurity. Who needs it? Right? I haven't been hacked yet, although there's an interesting article we'll talk about next week based on a study that's showing that small businesses are going out of business at a huge rate because of the hacks, because of ransomware. And if you're worried about ransomware, I've got a really great little guide that you can get. Just email me at craigpeterson.com. I'll send it off to you, right? It's a free thing, real information, not this cruddy stuff that you get from so many marketers, because I'm an engineer. Anyways, they'll go out of business. So they figured, well, I haven't got a business yet, not a big deal. And so nobody bought this big trade show. And I was so disappointed with the number of people that even showed up for this silly thing. So what happens next? Well, I get back to the office, and about a month, two months later, I get this notice from the state of Connecticut, their tax people, saying that I haven't paid my Connecticut taxes yet. And because I was in Connecticut, I should be paying my income tax for that day that I spent and wasted in Connecticut. Oh, and plus, every company in Connecticut that I'm doing business with now, I need to collect their taxes and pay them the taxes that I'm collecting for those Connecticut businesses or residents. Well, I didn't sell a thing. You know what? It took almost, I think it was 3 or maybe 4 years to get the state of Connecticut to finally stop sending me all of these threatening notices because I didn't get a dime from anybody in Connecticut. So I love the internet from that standpoint, saying, well, you don't have to collect taxes in certain cases, certain states, etc., right? Unless you have a legal nexus or a legal presence there in the state. So back to Amazon. Amazon loves the idea of having everything on the internet taxed. They love the fact that there's 9,000 plus tax jurisdictions. When you get right down to city, state, county, other local taxes. You look at those poor residents of New York State or the poor residents out in Washington State that have to worry about that, right? There's county taxes, state sales tax, city sales tax, right? And income taxes are much the same. All of these crazy cities and states around the country. Yeah, the ones that are in serious trouble right now, they are those same ones. Those particular jurisdictions are hard to deal with. So from Amazon's standpoint, it's just like the Patriots football players. We've got plenty of money. We've got teams of lawyers. We have all kinds of accountants. We can handle this. And you know why Amazon really loves it? Because it provides another obstacle for any competitors who want to enter the business. That's the real reason so many big businesses go ahead and charge you serious money so that they can use that money against you. Okay? You see where I'm going with this? Because if you want to start a business that competes with Amazon, if you want to have doilies, you're making doilies. My grandmother used to make them all of the time. She had them on the toilet paper in the bathroom, little doily holders and doilies everywhere. And then, of course, the seashells on top of the toilet paper holders. If you want to do that and sell it, how are you going to deal online with 9,000 tax jurisdictions? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to go to Etsy Or you're maybe going to go to Amazon Marketplace and sell your product there in Amazon Marketplace. So Amazon's taking its cut out of it, Etsy's taking its cut out of it, and you still ultimately have some of that tax liability. Amazon loves it. It's the same reason you see these groups formed, right? Barbers saying, oh, we've got to be regulated. Well, really? Really? You need to have a regulation in place for barbers. You need to have licensing for barbers. Why do they do that? Well, they do that, not just barbers, right? It's all of these licensures in various states. They do that really to keep people out, to keep their prices high. That's why they do it. Because someone can't just put up a sign and say, hey, I am now a barber, come get a haircut. And if you don't like the barber, if they do a lousy job, you go elsewhere, right? We don't need all of the bureaucracy on top of this to enforce licensure. Anyways, when we get back, let's talk about that Senate bill. It's a big deal, and I am coming down in the middle of this thing. Hey, visit me online, sign up right now, craigpeterson.com, and get my special report on passwords. I am coming down in the middle of this bill, and let me tell you why. We really do have a problem with some of these big businesses. For those of you who are watching here on Rumble or YouTube, I'm going to pull this up. This is an article that was originally in Wired and is in Ars Technica. Great website. They got lots of good information. And the title of the bill is a Senate bill that has big tech scared. So the question is why? Now, Ars Technica, I'm going to scroll this down so you can kind of see what they are saying, but they're claiming that this is really kind of apocalyptic, that frankly the people who are pushing against this bill are obviously the wrong people and everything else, right? But I love this point here. This is from Senior VP of Policy at Yelp. You can see this on my screen, Luther Lowe. And he's talking about this bill, well, actually one of two antitrust bills is what they're called in the U.S. There's voted out of committee by a very strong bipartisan vote. And the other bill is to regulate app stores, and there's issues with that too that we won't really be talking about today, but they have to do with protecting you, the consumer. You know, if you can load any app you want from any app store on the internet onto your iPhone, is your iPhone still safe, right? Versus having to get it from Apple. Well, we're not talking about that one right now. But this is Congress's shot here to stop big tech companies from abusing what they're calling a gatekeeper status. So we're going to talk about that. What is this gatekeeper status? What does that mean? So Luther Lowe, back to him, VP of Policy at Yelp, longtime Google antagonist, says it's the ball game. That's how these guys stay big and relevant. If they can't put their hand on the scale, then it makes them vulnerable to small and medium-sized companies eating their market share. Right? Isn't that what I was just saying? Protecting themselves, right? Protecting themselves against the small startups. And if you've got government regulation on your side, you can just hammer them with the fact that, hey, you guys aren't compliant, right? If you've got some major government regulation, just look at what happened with Elon Musk when he said, I'm going to buy Twitter. All of a sudden, his Twitter account has problems. All of a sudden, his money has problems. All of a sudden, when Elon Musk said, I'm going to buy Twitter, the government started investigating Tesla. It's amazing to me how these people work and how they think, right? It's absolutely amazing. So these big companies use government to beat other people over the head. It's like my example of the barbers, right? Do we really need licensing for barbers? Do we really need to have a barber board that oversees barbers? If someone harms you, there are laws against that. You know, when I was, for 10 years, I was in EMS. I was a volunteer EMT, right? You guys know that, emergency medical technician. And my wife was as well. And if we were to cut someone's hair without their consent, that would be considered assault, even battery in some cases. So there's laws on the book to protect your hair, okay? We don't need laws about barbers. We don't need laws about so many things the government sticks its fingers in. And so what does it stick its fingers in here? What are they trying to do? Let me pull that up on the screen for you again. Senators Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Grassley, I should say, are the top Democrat and Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee, are saying, hey, we need to regulate how Amazon, how Google, and these others can use their position in order to keep their fingers off the scale. So bottom line, that sounds like a pretty good idea to me, right? And you know, that's the thing that fits on the bumper stickers. Stop Google from putting their thumb on the scale, right? Stop Amazon from putting their thumb on the scale, because we have seen actual problems with this. We have seen where people who are using Amazon Marketplace to sell their stuff, why would they do that? Well, obviously they've got to pay a percentage to Amazon. Plus, depending on how your business operates, you have to pay Amazon to warehouse your goods for you. You have to pay Amazon for all the logistics services, for shipping, for moving it around between Amazon warehouses, and then for selling it. It can get pretty darned expensive. So, okay, Amazon charges. That seems pretty fair to me, right? The libertarian mindset. Where's the problem? I don't see the problem, Craig. Well, the problem is that Amazon has some of their own products that they want to sell. More than half of what's on the Amazon store is actually sold by third parties, and we've talked about that before. We talked about problems with that before. But that means that almost half of it is sold by Amazon. So Amazon has a number of brands. Last I checked, it was a few dozen brands that don't look like they're Amazon. There's a home services brand. You know, there's a place that sells couches or Chesterfields, depending on where you're from. There's a whole bunch of different businesses, clothing businesses, etc. that are actually Amazon, who might have bought a company, or they saw that a company was doing really well in their marketplace by selling item X. So what do? They go ahead and say, okay, well, we're going to start making item X. See where the problem comes in? So Amazon is using these small businesses that put everything on the line, right? They might have their house leveraged to the max. They might have sold their house and living with somebody else. Apartments are too expensive, so they could get the cash to get their business going. They scraped the money together. Maybe they had to pay $5,000 to have a mold made, injection mold, and then they have the stuff made in the U.S. or in China, or they're trying to print it on a 3D printer for the proof of concept, and they go through a number of different iterations of trying to make that product work, and consumers to like it, and consumers give them feedback saying, you know what, if this was a quarter inch smaller or moved over there on the product, it would just be so much more useful. So they add that. They had the engineering time. They've invested $250,000 easily to get the product off the floor, to get it out there, and people start buying it. Where are they selling it? Well, they got to really sell it on Amazon Marketplace, because who else are you going to go to for logistics, sales support, everything else, right? And not to mention the tax jurisdictions that want to collect money from you. And then Amazon comes out with a competing product. Is that enough to drive you crazy? Now, we've seen this forever in the software industry. Microsoft has done this for years. Apple does it too. I'm looking at a screen right here in front of me, hooked up to an Apple Mini, and some of the side card functions and stuff, they were developed by a third party that spent their blood, sweat, tears, and money on developing it, and then along comes a big guy, and you're out of business. Okay, we got to finish this up. We will do that when we get back. What's the Senate doing actually here, and what does it mean to you and me? Hey, visit me online, craigpeterson.com. Get my insider information for free. This is a huge problem. This happened to me a number of years ago, and I will never forget it. It was a really big lesson for me. I had designed and written a computer system that would take the code that it was written for a much older system and run it for much less money. So bottom line here, this was a system called CADE, Computer Assisted Data Entry, that was made by Sperry way back in the day. Yeah, I've been in it for that long. And they had little programs, and so they would not punch cards, but punch right onto tapes, those big 9-track tapes, and that information would then be used for processing later on in the day. Well, people, big businesses, grocery stores, you name it, were using that Sperry system. And I designed a system that would take their COBOL is what it was. It was a form of COBOL code from this CADE system. And you could use my code to compile it and run it on a Unix system. So the cost involved here was that it would be cheaper to buy a whole new Unix computer and buy new terminals and do some slight training changes, but the key punch operators, it would be exactly the same keystrokes as they were already used to, okay? So you know how fast they were, so it wouldn't slow them down at all, and their cost would be less than just the maintenance contract on the old Sperry CADE system. Very, very cool stuff, and it worked really well. And I worked with a couple of sales guys at Sperry, because Sperry had a Unix the tower system. It was a mini computer that was Unix based, and I had one. I had saved up my money. We bought this thing. It was a lot of money. Nowadays it'd be about $100,000 I spent on that system. And it was really, really cool. So some grocery stores started using it. They used it to build the space shuttle, to design it and send it into space. RCA Astrospace used it. My system, which is all really, really cool. So Sperry was interested in it, saying, okay, well, let's do this. Now, I had flown myself across the country because I was in California at the time, to do some of this work for RCA Astrospace, for the space program, and help make sure it was working, get it installed, help them configure it, and everything else, right? So I had a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort into this thing. It was a big, big venture. So Sperry invited me down to their headquarters down in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, to talk about this. And I was so excited because their sales guys wanted to sell it. They gave me some free space in a booth in Las Vegas. So I was in the Sperry booth with them and say, yeah, you can buy this, and you're using the new Sperry hardware. And I went down there and talked with them. Well, they never did anything with me. Here's a huge investment, young guy. And all of the stuff just worked, and they had proof of concept. They had a couple of customers already using this system, and it never materialized. And then about a year and a half later, I found out Sperry had tried to duplicate my system. and had messed it up terribly. It wasn't keystroke compatible, so anyone using the new Sperry system, they had to learn, okay, so I got to hit this, and I got to go over here, and I got to click on this. Are you kidding me? Using a mouse? Are you nuts? These are data entry operators. They just go all day long, just typing. And they had stolen my ideas. They messed it up. They didn't do as good a job as I did, which turns out it's pretty common. And they had stolen it. They stole it. Years of my life. So I've seen that before with me. I've seen Microsoft do that with friends of mine. And I've seen Apple do it with various products that they've decided to release. They all do it. Why do you think these businesses cannot spend money on research and development and yet at the same time stay in business as technology is continuing to move forward? Why? Well, the reason is they don't have to do why would we do R&D? Wait a minute now. All we have to do is either buy the company or steal the product, just re-engineer. Oh, and if we want to buy the company, we can do what Microsoft has been accused of doing again and again and again, which is, Microsoft, let's see here. I like that. That database is pretty darn cool. So here's what we're going to do. So Microsoft announces, hey, we're going to have a competitor to that coming out soon. And then they sit there and they wait and they say, okay, how many people are going to ask about it? Oh, wow, a lot of people asking for it. In the meantime, that company that had that great little database software trying to sell it, and people are saying, wait, Microsoft is going to come up with a version of this. I'm going to wait. We can wait a few months. Let's see what Microsoft does. So that poor company is now seriously struggling because this big company came out and made the announcement that they're going to do something like this. And then that small company gets a knock on the door. Hi, we're Microsoft or Company X, and we like your product. And you say, oh, wow, okay. So we're going to do a buyout. This is going to be fantastic. I might have to sign, a 2-year contract non-compete and help them manage it. Okay, we can deal with this. And then they find out that Company X says, well, you know what? Your company's not worth that much anymore. Your sales, look at their sales here. Man, they've gone way down. Okay, so let me see. Let's do a nickel on every dollar valuation you had a year ago. This happens every day, worldwide, in America. It should never happen to anyone. And as you can tell, it kind of upsets me. So, what are Klobuchar and Grassley doing here? Well, Amy, when she was running for president, she made this a big deal. I'm going to pull this up on my screen. Those of you who are watching on Rumble or YouTube, and you can find all of that at my website, craigpeterson.com, can see here. So they are trying to protect the American consumer, right? Yeah, that's it. They're going to protect us. And so what they're doing is saying, that would it ruin Google search results? Because that's what Google says. Is it going to bar Apple from offering new features, useful ones on the iPhone? How about Facebook? Will it stop them from moderating content? So the legislation's core idea is we will just let the marketplace take care of things. We're not going to let Amazon put their products in the product listings before third parties. But how are you possibly going to be able to regulate that stuff? You can't. You can't regulate it. Talking about a bureaucracy, you'd probably need one about as big as the federal government is right now. And the federal government needs to be cut back in a major way, right? There's just too much of it. How about the 150 million Americans? This article brings that up too. That are currently using Amazon Prime, even though the price went up, right? They have it free to Prime members. This is a big deal. The bill doesn't mention Prime, doesn't mention Google by name, Amazon, etc. But this is going to be a nightmare to enforce. The bill is not specific enough. It should be voted down. And between you and me, I don't know what can be done about this other than to have additional marketplaces show up online. And you know what? The conservative social media sites are starting to win. Well, you can see this. I'm going to pull this up on my screen for those watching on Rumble or on YouTube. But this is a big problem, and we've seen this again and again. Right now, they're going after certain workers in the chemical sector. But it isn't just the chemical sector. What we've seen is the bad guys going after anyone that's applying for a job. So let me give you a few tips here. First of all, you should not be paying to apply for a job. We see that all of the time. When it comes to the headhunting firms, what they'll do is they will charge the business who is looking to hire someone. That makes sense to you? They'll charge the business. So oftentimes it's a percentage of the annual salary, can be anywhere from usually 20% up to 100% or more, depending on the position. And boy, can they make a lot of money, but they don't necessarily place a lot of people. But you know how it is right now. There can be quite a few. So people have been applying for jobs to make a lot of money, and not realizing that that fee that supposedly they have to pay is illegitimate. So remember that, okay? The second thing has to do with this particular scam, because what they're trying to do is get into some of these companies. So they will send a thing out saying, hey, I'm a headhunter. I'm here for you. We're going to get you this job. You need to apply. Are you interested in a new job? Now, I've seen some stats online saying that somewhere around 30+% of people are looking, or at least open to, getting a new job, which means a lot more are looking for jobs. Now, I have to add to that the people who have jumped ship over the lockdown period really are not happy. The majority of them wish they had stayed where they were at. So keep that in mind too. But what they'll do is they'll say, hey, listen, there's this new feature on LinkedIn, by the way. You can say, I'm interested in looking for a job. I forget exactly what it says, but it goes around your picture. And I have it up there because, you know, I'm a contractor, right? I go to businesses and I help to harden their cybersecurity, and we usually start slowly, especially with like some of these startups we're doing work with right now, where they go from a completely flat network and it's all engineers, and I don't want anything hindering anything, and so you got to work with them, and it's just, you know, a week at a time sort of a thing. Okay, let's add this one thing this week, and then move on to one thing next week as well. So that's what I do for a living, and a lot of people are looking on LinkedIn and other places to find people who can be a chief information security officer. So I'm what you call a fractional chief information security officer. I do this under contract, and I've been doing contracts and contract work for, well, I don't know if I should admit it on the air, but my gosh, it's been now I guess it's 40 years. Right now. So I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm familiar with some of these scams. So take my word on some of this stuff, right? So what they do is they say, hey, we got a potential job opening. Are you interested? Now remember, when we talk about 30+% of people polled say that they're looking interested in a new job, right? You know the numbers are probably a little higher. Not that everyone's going to jump ship. Some people will. But there are a lot of people that if they get this email, they're going to open it up. And so what will happen now is this group out of North Korea called the Lazarus Group, and we've talked about them before, will go ahead and say, here's what's going to happen here. Let's just send you this thing. You can open it up, you can look at it and see if it's really a fit for you, right? I love this graphic that they have. This is from Dark Reading. I have it up on the screen again, Rumble and YouTube. But what should we do now? Should I open this up? Should I not open it up? Well, it turns out that what's happening is that Symantec and Broadcom both have noticed this and stated in an advisory a couple of weeks ago, be very careful, because what it's going to do is install a Trojan horse on your computer. So let's think about this. You're talking about the chemical sector. You have a lot of people who are very technical. And if a company wants to get some new technology, we talked about this earlier in the show, what do? Do they just go and say, oh, okay, let's get some R&D going here, research and development. Let's hire some scientists and do some pure science here, which almost never happens anymore. No, what they do is they either buy a company, they steal a company's idea, or if you are like the communists, you try and steal the technology directly. And that's exactly what these guys are doing. They put a Trojan on your machine because you open that file, and that Trojan then gives them access to your machine. Now, this particular Trojan is a malicious web file disguised as this job offer, and your machine gets compromised. Well, they attempt to compromise it, right? It's not always successful. There are not as many 0 days out there for these lower level actors like North Korea, but they've been able to do it. Now, they're not just going after chemical sectors. They're going after IT service providers. So companies like mine that provide managed security services for businesses, they are being attacked. So that's a problem too, isn't it? Because if you can compromise an IT company, and we've seen this all of the time, it's getting reported like crazy, you now have access to all of their customers, because the IT service company has passwords, etc., and they're probably using in the industry's number one or number two products for managing the customer's computers, neither of which are secure. And that's the biggest problem that we've had, right? We used some of these things before, I'm not going to name them right now because it wouldn't mean anything to you anyways, but we had to give them up. We worked with their IT people inside the software companies that make the software that are used by the managed services providers. And we talked with their developers and said, hey, listen, this is a serious problem. That's a serious problem. You got to change this. You got to change that. And what ended up happening? Well, we left them because they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. A very, very big deal. So they're targeting defense contractors, engineering firms of any sort. They want to steal IP, intellectual property. Pharmaceutical companies, yeah, very, very big deal. These threat hunting teams, including Cisco's, which are the guys that we use the most, Talos. That's, again, an example of a big company buying a smaller company called Talos that does threat intelligence and looks at stuff. They're all reporting to this. So high-level jobs in an industry are what you have to watch out for. Be very, very careful. Now, earlier this year, Lazarus Group, again, North Korea, went after some of these jobs, people, 250 that were identified working in the news media, software vendors, internet infrastructure providers, using job offers that appeared to come from Disney, Google, Oracle. By the way, that was according to Google, who tracked the campaign, right? They know what their employees are doing, where they're going, what emails coming in. It's crazy. We're looking at a lot of stuff. Okay, so I want to move on to the next topic here, last one this hour. But I'm going to pull this up right now on my screen. You can have a look at it there. Of course, if you are at home, you can, or well, really can't on the road, right? You can see this on Rumble and also see this on the YouTube site, at least for the time being, until I get kicked off, right? Kicked off again, right? That seems to be the word of the hour. But cost, reliability are raising concerns in IT. So again, this is a dark reading article, came out a couple of weeks back here. But the biggest concerns about cloud computing. So what is cloud computing? Let's talk about that first for a minute. Cloud computing is going online using something like Salesforce.com. People don't think of that as cloud computing, do they? But you have in Salesforce all your communications with all of your customers, etc. That's an example of a platform as a service, basically. So they're providing you with everything, and it's up in the cloud. Nothing to worry about here, folks. But of course, you have the same potential problems you do elsewhere. People use, what's it called now? Microsoft 365, which Microsoft disclaims any liability for any problems they cause for any customers. It's really kind of crazy. But again, what are the problems there? Well, reliability / performance. 50% of the people, 50%, I'll pull up on the screen again here, worried about reliability and performance. Because if your business is relying on cloud computing, what now? Is the security any good? You could use something, as I mentioned, Salesforce, and just picking them out of a hat. They haven't been like a terrible provider by any stretch. But how about if you're going to Azure and you're using a workstation in Azure? How about if you're going to some other place, right? It could be Amazon Web Services. Google also has data processing services. Security is a huge issue. Cost is a huge issue. Reliability, performance, all of those were issues with more than 50% of the IT professionals. I'm surprised at this next one, which is our staff skill set on dealing with cloud computing, 26%. The reason I'm surprised by that is hardly anybody knows enough about cloud computing to be really confident about it. I'm serious about that. There's some companies right now. We're talking with a company called Wiz, and they audit Azure configuration. So be very, very careful. If you're using cloud, particularly if you're a business, it may not work out well for you. Hey, make sure you go online right now, craigpeterson.com/subscribe. Sign up. You'll get my newsletters. You'll get all kinds of great information absolutely free. craigpeterson.com, including my special report on passwords. Now, if you have any questions, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. Microsoft, yeah, they've been around a long time. They've been helping us. They've had lots of cybersecurity problems. People use Microsoft software on their desktops. Some people use it for servers, which is crazy. But listen to what they're doing now. This is a little concerning. I'm going to pull this article up on the screen for those of you who are watching along, either on Rumble or YouTube. Ars Technica article. They have some really great articles. This particular one is about our friends at Microsoft. This is cool. Microsoft announced today, this was like a week or so ago, that Microsoft would be suspending all new sales of Microsoft products and services in Russia following the country's unjustified, unprovoked, and unlawful invasion of Ukraine. Now, Microsoft didn't give any specifics about the products, but it really is likely to be a blanket ban of all of the Microsoft products. This is very cool because Microsoft has taken an approach I've never seen them do before, which is, okay, when a Mac gets hacked, you get our friends at Apple putting together patches and getting them out. They get them out pretty quick. Microsoft had been doing much the same. The problem was, some months, there were patches every day that you had to apply. Yeah, that's how bad this software is. And they decided that, man, let's be like politicians here. Let's release some very damning news Friday about 4:30 p.m. before a long weekend so no one will notice, right? Yeah, our friends, the politicians, do that all of the time. What Microsoft decided they'd do is, hey, wait a minute, we're going to have patches. It's not going to slow down. because our code is terrible. So what we're going to do, let me see here. How about we just release all of them at once? We'll just call it Patch Tuesday, right? Because people were complaining about how much work it was, how much effort it was to try and update them, these machines, and apply these patches every day. Huge problem for everybody from home users through big companies out there. So Microsoft decided, okay, well, let's do that. Let's bury it so nobody will notice. Okay, that's what Microsoft does, and now we've gotten used to that. Now, you remember two guys, right? Bill Gates, followed by Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer was a nut job. Bill Gates was a bad man. I think he's just been trying extra hard to compensate for all of the evil he did over the years. But what we're looking at now is new management. And he's been in there now for a few years, doing a great job cleaning up Microsoft, making it a very competitive company. He has done some amazing things. One of the things that he has decided to do that's been very effective is, how about this? How about we go ahead and we work with various governments to help stop these Russian hackers? And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, what was happening. And the Microsoft had reached out to the White House and said, hey, listen, we have been looking at the hacks that have been coming from the Russian hackers. And we've been preparing fixes for some of those hacks. How about we work directly with some of these other countries? This reminds me a whole lot of the Lend-Lease program in World War II. You might remember this thing. But the U.S., of course, initially was not involved in the war. And they decided, okay, we got to help the United Kingdom. How are we going to help them? The UK doesn't have the money to buy ships, to have us make weapons, bullets. What they did is they had people donate their rifles, the guns, ammo from home. Plus, they made them, the government, instead of selling them to the UK, they lent them to the UK because the UK could not afford everything that it needed in order to fight a war against the National Socialists in Germany. So what did they do? We just shipped the stuff over there and called it a lend/lease. I think that's a great idea, and what Microsoft is doing is also a great idea. They have been decoding, reverse compiling, if you will, and interpreting the code, looking at what some of the ransomware and other malicious code that Russia's been using against Ukraine. And they have been providing all kinds of inside information to these other countries. Now, this is a great idea for a few reasons. One of the reasons, and I think maybe the biggest reason, is that the ransomware, the viruses, all of this malware that they're producing is not particularly discriminating. Do you guys remember, maybe, I don't know, what was it, 6 months ago, I told you how to avoid getting most of this Russian ransomware. And it was as easy as just installing a keyboard on your computer, Windows or Mac. Windows, those are the machines that are always getting attacked, quite successfully most of the time. But the Windows keyboard for Russian language. Now, you didn't even have to use it. You don't have to have a keyboard, right? This isn't a Russian keyboard that I'm holding up here on camera. This is just a regular US keyboard. You can just install a virtual Russian keyboard. And once that keyboard was installed, you're pretty safe. Why? Because Vladimir Putin, dictator for life of Russia, decided he would just go ahead and stop anybody that was trying to hack Russian companies, businesses, government agencies. And what's the best way for the hackers to do that? Because they didn't want to end up in Siberia for the rest of their lives because of a hack. No, they went ahead and said, okay, if there's a Russian Cyrillic keyboard on the machine, we're not going to activate. So if the software, the malware got on your computer, all you need to do is have a Russian keyboard, virtual. Yeah, that's it. Pretty simple. I told you that months ago. Now what we're seeing is these indiscriminate types of software that are being used in Ukraine. Why doesn't the keyboard trick work? Well, some Ukrainians speak Russian. We could go in to the background on that, of the massacre, the starvation, purposeful starvation of Ukrainians by the Soviet Union over many years ago, and how they then gave their property, their homes, to Russians to move into in order to occupy Ukraine. So there's people in Ukraine who are Russian speaking. Of course, now we're talking 2 or 3 generations, 4 maybe, down the road from when the Soviet Union killed all of those millions of people. But there, suffice it to say, there's Russian-speaking people there. Let me put it that way, particularly in southeastern Ukraine. Anyways, I'm going on and on. This is not an education on war or history. We're talking about cybersecurity. So they being Microsoft, found many cases of Russians putting destructive and disruptive, or even more than that, data wiping malware onto computers. It spreads indiscriminately. So Microsoft, looking at what's happening in Ukraine, trying to get patches together for all of us, letting other countries know about what's going on, is going to be amazing. Because this malware, which is wiping computers primarily, it's not really just straight up ransomware, give us money and we'll give you your data back. This is destroying your data. That malware is going to leak outside of Ukraine. Yeah, cause us all kinds of potential problems. When we get back, I want to talk about this here. This is our friend Elon Musk, and we've been following along with some of the stuff been going on with his new satellite system in Ukraine. Stick around. The whole concept of these satellites encircling the Earth, providing us with internet, just regular guides, it's going to be in our smartphones, is changing everything. We're going to talk about Elon Musk and what's happened over in Ukraine. Our friend Elon Musk has done a lot of things over the years. He has really helped us, frankly. The Tesla and what's been happening there, SpaceX, his main concern being let's get man off of a single planet onto multiple planets, right? The movement to Mars. NASA's working on a serious moon base. That reminds me of Space 1999. You guys remember that show? Yeah, we're going to have a moon base by then. And it makes a lot of sense, right? So who's going to go to these? Well, there's some interesting lotteries. People have to apply and everything else. But he's done so much, right? He's got the Boring Company. You already know about Tesla. Boring Company, in case you didn't know, makes underground tunnels. He has also done a few other things. He's got a huge battery manufacturing facility. They're working on new battery technologies to make all of our lives a little bit better, particularly if we have an electric house or electric car. Because what good is it to have electricity that you can't use? And that's really what they're trying to do, is make it so that electricity is available 24/7 for you. And the SpaceX, which is what I mentioned, as well as what we're going to talk about right now. I'm going to pull this up on my screen for those of you who are watching over on Rumble or, of course, YouTube. This is fascinating. He said there's a high probability of Russian attacks on Starlink in Ukraine. Now, that is fascinating because what he's done is he has sent over truckloads. I'm showing a picture of a truck, in fact, with these Starlink terminals in it. That's from Ars Technica. Just double checking it here. But this is very cool. This is posted by the Vice Prime Minister over there in Ukraine. And they are talking about these terminals. Now, a terminal in this case is something that allows your devices to talk to the Starlink satellites. There's going to be a huge constellation. They've got 2,000 satellites up, and they're putting another 12,000 up. These types of satellites are much different than what we've been used to over the years. Typically, we've had these massive things sitting up in space. I worked with RCA Aerospace many years ago, and I saw the testing facilities, which were just incredible. They had this huge vacuum chamber that they brought me in to see as we were working on space shuttle software. Yeah, I wrote software that they used to put the space shuttle together. Yeah, way back in the day. So that was a pretty proud moment. Anyways, we're not talking about these huge satellites like they used to launch. We're talking about very small satellites. And they're not just sitting way up there. These are basically in low orbit around the Earth, and they're geostationary. In other words, they stay in one spot, I believe, is the way they've got these things set up. So these satellites then because they're so close to the Earth, allow them to use less power. And also, the other advantage to that is the delay, right? The delay between having to send it all the way up and back down, because electricity takes time, right? Yeah, it travels at the speed of light. But nowadays, you might have noticed it can take a quarter second, half a second when you're talking to someone. When I'm on the radio with some of these radio stations, the delay can be absolutely incredible, like a half second to a second sometimes. And that's just because they're being cheap. Anyhow, this type of technology where you have these constellations, and it isn't just Elon Musk, it isn't just Starlink, but constellations ultimately we'll have tens of thousands of satellites up there. Now, there's all kinds of other potential problems. Not getting into that right now. But what it does mean is you can communicate. And we've never had this sort of thing before. We had the U.S. military, the Navy, in fact, put together a communication system that lives on top of the internet, called nowadays generically the dark web. And it was set up to allow our military, our State Department, to be able to communicate with people in countries that are, back in the day, under Soviet control, all kinds of potential problems. So whenever those problems existed, they just went ahead and used this onion network, which is part of the dark web, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we had before. Now, what happens if you're a country like Ukraine, where 100% of your internet comes from Russia? Russia obviously can sit there and listen in. Hopefully your encryption's good. A lot of Russians have been using Telegram in order to get real news about what's happening in their country and other places. And Telegram is not that secure, frankly. WhatsApp, pretty secure. Signal is the one you want to pay close attention to. Signal is considered to be the most secure of all of these secure communications apps. But there's a level above all of that. Because if they can tell that you're communicating, even that is enough to give them some information. So they might not know what was in that transmission, but if the transmission is all of a sudden tons of activity coming over, lots of data, lots of messages going back and forth, they can say maybe there's something about to happen. That came out, you might remember the old Orange book for security way back in the 80s, I think is when it came out. But part of what you had to do was cover up your actual real communication. So it's one thing to have the communications encrypted, but you wanted to always have about the same amount of communications going back and forth so people couldn't figure out what you're doing. Now, with these types of devices, that kind of problem still exists. And this is part of what Elon Musk is warning about here. Pull it up on my screen again for those people who are watching. Elon Musk is urging users of his satellite system to put their Starlink antennas as far away from people as possible. Now, why would he be doing that? Because, frankly, that terminal is transmitting to the satellite as well as receiving from the satellite. And it is entirely possible that there could be some evil software that is listening in for the satellite transmissions and sends a little missile your way. Also, of course, the Russians have satellites in space that can look down on the ground. Now, something as small as a terminal for Starlink, a little hard to see. But Elon Musk is saying, hey, listen, guys, go ahead and camouflage it. You might want to spray paint it. Just don't use metallic paint so that they can't see it, and place it as far away from where people are as possible. So you can still use it, and only use it when you need to use it. Don't keep it up and running all of the time. But this is the start of something great. Something where you can't easily block people's communication. So Russia has tried to do that. And they have been jamming the Starlink satellites. So what did Musk do? He diverted all of his engineers to working on how can we get around the Russian jamming. And according to Elon Musk, they have gotten around it. And they now have their satellite systems completely jam-free from the Russians. I think that's fascinating. They're probably using some good spread spectrum technology that was actually known about in World War II. And we could talk about that for a long time. Hetty, you might remember her. Anyways, skip that for now. Stick around. We got more when we come back. A whole bunch of pandemonium out there because of what Russia's been doing in Ukraine and how it's flowing over to us as well. Hey, this is not great news. There is a whole bunch going on when it comes to Russia, of course, invasion of Ukraine. We're going to talk about that. And what is ICANN? How does this domain system work? And why are people calling to have .ru deleted? This is really a big deal, and if you're watching from home, let me go full screen on this article. This is an article from Ars Technica, and I've been talking about it all week, which is that ICANN won't revoke Russian internet domains, says the effect would be devastating. This is frankly pretty darn fascinating to me because ICANN is this international organization. It was put together in order to help make the internet international. Now, I'm not talking about the data international, but control of it. A lot of countries were complaining because, of course, the internet was created in the United States. It was created by U.S. taxpayers' money for the DoD, and it was designed to be very resilient. In fact, so resilient that there could be a nuclear blast, and that nuclear blast ends up causing problems, but the internet's still going to work. And the whole idea behind it was you could have multiple routers. They're all talking to each other. Nowadays, they're talking BGP4, and they can say, how can I get from here to there? So the idea behind BGP is they all share this information. What's the least cost way? What's the easiest way, cheapest way, if you will, for me to get from point A to point B? And it changes all of the time. So you might be on a phone conversation. You might be listening to me right now online, streaming or watching the video. You might be doing who knows what out there with digital communications, but the communications channel that you think you're using, where the data is going from, let's say, my microphone ultimately to your device, your ears, that data path, once it becomes data, can be changing multiple times a second. Now, it actually changes quite a bit initially as these internet backbone routers send least cost routing information back and forth, to and fro. Very good thing, frankly, because it helps to speed everything up. And there's other tricks that we're using. You might have seen, for instance, Akamai and some of the URLs before of sites that you've gone to. And that's called a content delivery network. And that helps get the content to be closer to you. So if you're on a website in California and you're in New Hampshire, that website video, that website graphic, etc., is going to be coming from a server local to me here in New Hampshire, right? That's how that all is supposed to work. So we have names. You guys know about that, internet domain names. And those domain names, you already know, those are turned into internet addresses. And those addresses are then used by the routers to figure out where to go, how to get the data there. The problem that we're having right now, of course, is Russia seems to be substantially abusing the internet. Putin put a kill switch onto the Russian internet some time ago. And the idea behind this kill switch was, hey, listen, if we don't want the world to be talking to us, we'll just cut it off. Now, he's tested it a couple of times, but what he has not done is shut it down. And he hasn't shut it down as part of this Ukraine war. What they did is they passed laws saying, hey, if you publish something that disagrees with what we're saying, you get 15 years in prison. And even these people who've been protesting on the streets, they're getting about 60 days, 30 to 60 days in jail just for protesting what's going on. So a lot of people have been saying, why don't we turn off the Russian internet? Now, we're not going to use Putin's kill switch in order to shut it all off. We're not going to do, a few things we decided not to do. Denial of service attacks, etc. Although there are hackers doing that, and we are going to talk about that today. But they're saying, well, let's just go ahead and let's kill their .ru, the country domain. And the guy who heads it up, said, hey, listen, our mission is just to make sure that the internet works. So shutting off the .ru domain so that no one can go ahead and send, a request out to the domain name servers and get a resolution to an IP address. So if you try and go to Kremlin.ru or something, you will get blocked. And you'll get blocked, not like the Great Firewall of China or of Russia. Now, they've got one going pretty good. Yeah, thank you. You ain't using U.S. technology. It's crazy what we've been doing. But what it does is it says, .ru, I don't know. What are you talking about? So there have been a lot of people who have been pushing for it, and you'll see on my screen here that Ukraine's requested to cut Russia off from some of these core parts of the internet, and ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, couldn't remember what that was earlier, said that ICANN must remain neutral. And their mission, they say, is not to take punitive actions. It's to make sure the internet works. So are they really taking punitive actions if they cut Russia off? It's really interesting to me because look at what has been going on. You've got companies like Facebook as the great example who has gone ahead and just shut off people. They didn't like what they were saying. My goodness. At one point, if you said you should wear a mask during this pandemic, you would be cut off from Facebook. And then, of course, if you said, no, you shouldn't wear a mask, at that point you would be cut off because science, right? Science is, we know exactly what we're doing. It goes on and on. If you said that it came from a lab in China, you would have your account suspended. Now, of course, the whole tune has changed. And it probably came from a lab in China. It's crazy what these people have been doing. So we have arbiters of truth who are some contractors sitting in their home or wherever it is, the contractors for Facebook, that are going through posts that people are flagging as incorrect, as fake news. So what happens is people say fake news, and then that goes off to their team that then looks at it and says, okay, yeah, fake news, because we disagree with it. It just blows my mind. We have to have free and fair and open discussions, don't we? So you have that line at Facebook, and Google does some of the same. A lot of these sites do a lot of the same. You get our major media outlets that are all deciding what they want to report on and what they want to label as fake and fake news. I'm just shaking my head because it's hard to believe. What about Russia? Russia is putting out fake news. As I've said many times before, the first casualty in war, this isn't my quote, the first casualty in war is what? It's the truth. So if truth is the first casualty, then that means we got a lot of propaganda going on. We had propaganda coming out of Ukraine. We've caught some of those, like the ghost fighter pilot, whatever it was, who had killed, what was it, 5 Soviet or Russian jets, Soviet era, using Soviet era technology on the part of the Ukrainians. Turns out, okay, that was false news. That was fake news. The whole thing about Snake Island, where you had that Russian military, I don't know what it was, a frigate, but anyways, boat sitting there saying, we are Russian warship, you will surrender or whatever. Do you remember that? Snake Island, just a small place, 13 guys. And supposedly they shelled it and they killed all 13. Turns out that was probably fake news as well. So that's from the Ukrainian side. And on the Russian side, they hardly reported as to how many deaths there were. In fact, initially for quite a while, they were saying there are no deaths. And at the same time, the Ukrainians are saying there are 2,500 Russians dead, and that number keeps going up. Who knows what it is today? It gets really crazy in the time of war. So if Facebook is going to stop someone from saying don't wear masks or do wear masks, depending on what day of the week it is, basically, right? Wednesday, it's okay to say that. Thursday, it's not okay to say that, and we're banning you. It's nuts. Well, then why can't that type of censorship move on to the next level? Right, that's the big question I have. Now, should we be shutting it off? I'll pull this back up on the screen again. And this article from Ars Technica is saying that experts have warned, whoever they are, that shutting down the .ru domain is going to cause just incredible problems for Russians, which man would it ever, talking about a major blow to an economy. And it would also cause problems for people who are trying to find out more truth about Russia, because you couldn't get to their sites. Now, we've seen some amazing things in Russia. We had one of the Russian news agencies, RT, which is broadcasting here in the U.S., their entire staff just walked out saying, forget about it, we're not going to promote this fake news. But this is a legitimate question. Me, personally, I don't think anybody should be censoring anybody for almost anything. You know, there are some limits, but they're pretty extreme in my book. I'd rather know someone is an idiot because they're allowed to say stupid things and counter their arguments. You've got to have discussions. Anyways, stick around. We'll be right back. Pandamonium is the name of the game over there in Russia, and they are being very successful. We're going to talk about what happened in Belarus. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in Ukraine with cybersecurity and what's happening right here, right now. I'd also like to invite you guys to listen to me on all kinds of apps out there, including the TuneIn app and many others. Let me get my screen set up, because now you can also catch me on Rumble and on YouTube. This is almost a complete, let me pull this up for you. There we go. Complete Ars Technica day. They've got some great articles this week looking into the Russians. What are they doing? What kind of problems is that causing us? But we are seeing some interesting attacks back on Russia, and back in a very big way. Russia has been going after Ukraine in the cyberspace for a long time. We spoke a few years ago about what Russia had been doing with the tax software for Ukraine. We don't do this in the U.S. or in Canada, but a number of European countries do. Where you have to have the official tax preparation software put together by the government for your business or for your person, depending on the country you're living in. France is a great example of this, and Ukraine's another one. So Ukraine says, hey guys, you got to go ahead and use our software. That means every business in Ukraine is using their software to manage their tax payments and their accounts, frankly. And that wonderful little piece of software was hijacked by our friends in Russia. So they grabbed a hold of it, they injected some code into it that added ransomware to the software. So now all of the businesses in Ukraine are pretty much guaranteed to be using this hacked software. We have a client who has offices over in France, and we found a really interesting problem with them because the French software that was being used for taxes for French businesses had an extra little problem. And that extra problem was it was insecure as can be. Whoever wrote this must have taken a Microsoft programming course and had no idea about the consequences of what they were doing. So it was very insecure. It was using a version of SSL, which is an encryption that's based on another type of encryption. I don't want to get too wonky here, but that was just one of its many problems, and bad keys, etc., etc. And keys, by the way, it was using keys that had been revoked, which you should never do. Bottom line. Oh my gosh. Hey, if you want more information on this, just drop me a note, me@craigpeterson.com. And you can also get my newsletter with all kinds of great little tips, me@craigpeterson.com. Just let me know. So in this case, we had to help that company in France ignore the security restrictions that were on their system so they could use the French tax system. So anyways, I told you that so I could tell you that the same thing happened to Ukraine in a different way. Their software was pre-infected, so when they downloaded it, ta-da, they got that piece of ransomware, that virus that spread. It was just a nightmare. And of course, it robbed, if you will, Ukraine government of funds that it would have been getting. So we've had now a bit of a shift. I'm going to pull this up on the screen again, this article, because what the shift has shown is that the hackers are now operating on the side of Ukraine, which is just fascinating. So the group called Anonymous, you might be familiar with them. Of course, they've been doing a lot of hacking for a lot of years, releasing private information, government information, all of that sort of stuff. And they have amassed what they're calling a volunteer IT army. And this IT army has been going and doing what? Well, hacking Russian sites, apparently. So this article is just absolutely fascinating. They pulled some of it from Wired as well. But the Russian Space Research Institute, their website was hacked. Leaked files that were stolen from the Russian Space Agency made it all the way onto the internet. The space agency was hacked and their website said, leave Ukraine alone, else Anonymous will you up even more. They also did what's called a DOS attack, which is a distributed denial of service attack. Those can be very difficult to protect against unless you're set up in advance to help protect yourself. And that pretty much destroyed Russia's .ru top-level domain. So we've talked about how domain services work, right? So .ru is like .com, except .ru is for Russia. And so the domain name servers that handle .ru were knocked off the air because no one could really get to them. They used amplifying attacks and stuff without getting into all of the details. So basically, they were trying to cut off access, and they did for a lot of people, to any domain that ended in .ru. It's great. These are just some of the latest in the surge of hacktivism that's been going on. One of the ones I mentioned a couple of weeks ago with the Belarusians deciding they were going to hack the Belarus Railroad, which was being used to bring Russian troops, supplies, tanks, etc., all on rail, right, down right to the border of Ukraine. So that was hacked so that they couldn't use it in order to go after, of course, Russia was able to get to Ukraine. But there's also been protests around the world. 48 Russian cities raised millions of dollars through cryptocurrency donations. Now, I'm not a big cryptocurrency guy. And I'm not a big cryptocurrency guy because, well, Cryptocurrency is likely to be outlawed by most, if not all, governments, and they certainly could shut it down, and it is not anonymous, all right? So using cryptocurrency does not mean, it does not equate to completely anonymous. But they have done a lot of donations there, big companies, including, we just talked earlier about Microsoft, but also Apple, Shell, BP, McDonald's, Starbucks, and these hacktivists have really joined in. And we talked about a couple of other things. So this is messy here, because even more than in peacetime, these active combats that are really happening right now, rendering hacktivism ineffectual and largely just distracting, because we are now in a hot war, right? Now, maybe we don't have our airplanes bombing Russian movements or other things, but there is a kinetic war going on over there. There are bullets, etc., being exchanged. So the hacktivist efforts have been visible. There's no question about that. But what have they done? See, that's an advantage to being a country like Russia or like the Ukraine, because both of those countries, their industrial base, the military industrial base, is not heavily automated, unlike ours. What could you do? What can you shut down? So what? You shut down the Russian Space Agency's website. How far did you get into it? Probably not very far. We also have a couple of groups, and we talked about these guys many times, the Conti group, which has been just terrible at hurting U.S. businesses, individuals, government agencies and stuff. The Cumin Project. Both of them have declared their allegiance to Russia. You might remember a few weeks ago we talked here about how we have had some researchers track down most of these Russian hacker groups and their money. And they all ended up in one building in Moscow. Now, that should tell you something, right? In fact, the most expensive real estate right there in downtown Moscow, the tallest building, etc. So these groups getting together in order to protect the fatherland there in Russia, interesting problem. How much of this is really controlled by the Kremlin? It's a very good question. Conti was dismantling its infrastructure. Some of their top people were arrested by Putin's police state over there. And that was interesting too. That was, again, before the invasion. But why would Putin be shutting them down? Well, apparently they said some things that they shouldn't have said. So now they've come out and have decided they're going to support Russia in its entirety. Now, we mentioned Microsoft and how Microsoft has decided they are going to protect other countries as well as Ukraine, at least as far as the Russian malware goes. And they've been very active in that. And there are a number of cybersecurity companies and other organizations that have released free versions of some of their software. These digital defense tools, free offerings to help Ukrainians defend the networks. Google says its human rights focused DDoS protection service, Project Shield, is now in use by more than 150 Ukrainian websites. So it's very good, bottom line. Pravda, by the way, published this massive trove of personal data, allegedly identifying 120,000 Russian soldiers deployed in Ukraine. That was Ukrainian Pravda, not the good old Russian Soviet Pravda. Man, I remember I bought one of those on a newsstand in Canada once, and I had a friend who was from Yugoslavia, and he said, "Oh, can I show that to my wife?" And he showed it to his wife. She tore it up. I said, "I want my Pravda." CraigPeterson.com.